This is part 5 of A Wolf Amongst Lions by Kallypso. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy, and subscribe for future stories. Please check the description for a full list of tags and the link to drop a kudos for the original author. With that out of the way, let's continue. Chapter 27, Until There Comes Another. Reality was rarely tethered for Cersei these days. Between the alcohol and the lack sleep and the intense, constant paranoia, she almost never felt like she was standing on solid ground, and Tyrion's disappearance only made it worse. So long as he was out there, he could still plot the ruin of their house. At least when he was here, she could keep an eye on him, but now, he could be anywhere at all. It made her sick to think about. Her only constant was Jaime. Tommen had been stolen away from her by that Tyrell girl, Myrcella had been stolen by Dawn, and Joffrey had been stolen by death itself. Jaime she still had, Jaime she would always have. Until she didn't. Cersei barely heard the words when Jaime first told them to her. That father was forcing him to leave the king's guard, that he was engaged to that little wolf bitch. How that girl had been digging her teeth into this family, a Stark of Winterfell, a wolf amongst lions, and she thought she could take Jaime from her as well. It's father's plotting, Jaime had said. Really, Cersei, she wants nothing to do with me. But how could he know that? What if she had presented the idea to their father? She had so much of his favour now, didn't she? Perhaps she wanted a more favourable position in the Lannister family. Until there comes another, younger and more beautiful, to cast you down and take all that you hold dear. Arya Stark could not be the girl the witch had spoken of. She was younger but certainly not a beauty. The prophecy surely meant Margaery Tyrell, who took her son away. Yet Arya was promised to Tommen before her, and Arya had won her father's favour, and now would wed her brother. Take all that you hold dear. She gave Jaime some sensible reply. At least she hoped it sounded sensible. Yes, of course, it's not you or the girl's fault. Father is plotting again, I understand. Jaime did not buy the lie. He eyed her with obnoxious concern. When he reached out to rest a hand on her shoulder, Cersei jerked away from him. I said I understand. Leave me. He did with little argument. There was fear in his eyes. He had feared her for some time for the woman she had become. But who could blame her? So many wars, a wretched husband who did not love her, and a dead monster of a son who she loved more than life itself. She had paid too high a price for being a woman in this world. Once Jaime had gone, Cersei wandered from her room. She did not know where she was going, to yell at her father perhaps, but what could she yell at him for? He did not know how she truly felt about Jaime. He should though, or he is willfully blind, Cersei thought. She drifted in the general direction of the Hand's Tower, her mind twisting and turning with wine and the witch's prophecy. But as she walked down the steps leading toward the west wing of the castle, she crossed paths with Arya Stark. Cersei stopped in her tracks at the top of the stairs, and the Stark girl stopped at the bottom, glaring up at her. How much hate she had in her heart, Cersei wondered if it could begin to match her own. Lady Stark, she said softly. Lady Lannister, Arya replied curtly. She started up the steps as if she meant to ignore her, but Cersei would not allow that. Wait a moment, I have a question, she said. Arya paused mid-step right beside Cersei. She did not look at her, only stared ahead like she wanted nothing more than to keep walking. Yes. Are you satisfied? Cersei asked. Now that you've ensnared my brother and my father, are you happy? Have you had your revenge? Arya's jaw clenched. I haven't ensnared anybody, and I do not want to marry your brother. That's a weak lie. I know your game, Cersei spit. I don't play that kind of game. Not everyone thinks like you, your grace. Arya looked at her then. Her gaze was cold as winter's first snow. Sorry, I suppose it's my lady now. You're not a queen anymore. The words hit Cersei hard. The wolf bitch started up the stairs again, but Cersei drew her hand back to smack her. As her hand flew, Arya's eyes seemed to flare with grey fire. She caught her wrist in an iron grip. Do not touch me, she said flatly. 2 steps above Cersei on the stairs, the Stark girl now loomed over her. How dare you, Cersei spit. You forget who you are. I don't. I am Arya Stark of Winterfell, and you are Cersei Lannister of Casterly Rock, Arya replied. You are just a lady like me now. You are not a queen. You have no crown, and if you try to strike me again, I will strike you back harder. Cersei stared at her with wide eyes. Now she knew who Arya reminded her of. She saw it blazing in her grey eyes. Lyanna Stark, the same woman who Rhaegar Targaryen had chosen, the same woman who Robert Baratheon, her husband, cried out for in their marriage bed. She looked just like her. Until there comes another, younger and more beautiful, to cast you down and take all that you hold dear. Gods, why were Stark such a plague upon her? Cersei drew away from Arya Stark, jerking her hand back. She turned and stumbled away down the hall. She would have to find some other way to deal with Arya Stark. Poison would be the ideal method. She had proven herself too resistant to a violent assassination, though perhaps she could make her death look like an accident. Her father could hardly blame her for an accident. The North might blame them, but what did she care? Fuck the Northmen. They could hold them off easily. She rounded the corner and nearly ran right into someone's chest. She felt hands on her shoulders, steadying her. Cersei. Get out of my way, she muttered. Cersei, the voice said again, more firmly this time. She looked up to see her father looking down at her. What a stern face he had. It reminded her of when she was a child and he caught her in the midst of a lie. Yes, father, Cersei managed. She could barely look him in the eye, she was so damn drunk. Tywin studied her for a long time. His gaze went from cold to almost, tired, exhausted even. Come with me, he said at last. It was cold at the docks, close to freezing in fact, but Cersei did not mind the bite of the wind. These days she rarely felt anything at all because her mind was so soaked in wine. It was nice to feel pain, a physical pain to distract from the aching of her heart. She leaned against the wall of the walkway overlooking the docks, gripping the stone edge with her hands. Her father was watching her. He had not said anything since they arrived, and the silence was beginning to eat at her soul. I'm fine, Cersei said at last. If Jaime told you anything, he is mistaken and overreacting. Jaime hasn't told me anything, Tywin said. Then why am I here? Because I have my own eyes and ears. Tywin glanced at her. How drunk are you? Don't try to lie. Cersei glared down at her hands. Very. That's not specific. You didn't ask for specific. Cersei said petulantly, and it's not as if I remember how much wine I've drunk. I can barely tell you the time of day. Tywin did not reply. Go on, lecture me. Tell me that this is not any way for a lady of House Lannister to behave. Remind me that my actions reflect on you. She laughed once. You're fond of your lectures. I think it gives you great joy to tell someone that they're wrong, that you know better than they do. It gives me no joy at all to have this conversation with you, Tywin said. This is not a lecture. My words won't do you any good now. This is a goodbye. Cersei managed to turn her head enough to look at him. Her long blonde hair fell in her eyes. What do you mean? I'm sending you back to Casterly Rock, her father said, until you have regained your faculties. Cersei's chest constricted at the words. I can't. Leave, my place is here, I'm the queen. You aren't, Tywin said, nor are you queen regent any longer. You are the mother of the king, but you are only a hindrance to Tommen. I won't let you ruin him like you ruined Joffrey. Cersei barred her teeth slightly, straightening. No, you can't send me away. I'm the only one who can protect Tommen, the only. You're a danger to him, Tywin said. You're drunk, you're paranoid, you've lost all control of yourself. And you think that gives you a right to ship me back to the Rock, Cersei hissed. I am not one of your damned subjects, You're my daughter, Tywin snapped, and you will do as I command before you ruin yourself too. I will not watch you fall to madness in this place. You were the one who sent me here, father, Cersei snarled. Years ago, it was you who gave me to Robert Baratheon because you could only think to marry me off like some broodmare. You never even thought of treating me the same as Jaime, did you? Never thought that I might be your legacy. Her father stared her down. There was crushing disappointment in his eyes. It was the very worst thing for Cersei to see, to know she had once again fallen below his expectations. You were my legacy, that's why I made you queen of the 7 kingdoms. While you were busy wishing you had been born a man you could have ruled, instead you let bitterness swallow you up and make you this. He looked away. There's nothing more I can do for you now. A feral, desperate urge ripped through Cersei. She lunged at her father then, meaning to strike him, or perhaps push him down the steps, but he intercepted her, grasping both of her wrists tight in his hands. She struggled and screamed, but his grip did not give. Though he was older, he was still quite strong. Still, she did not stop fighting, not until footsteps reached her ears and other hands took hold of her shoulders, her father's guards. In a flash of panic, Cersei looked up at him, her gaze pleading. Her father looked right back at her. For a moment she caught a glimpse of regret in his eyes. When Cersei was a child, just after her mother had died, she had screamed at the gods to bring her back. When he caught her in her furious prayer, she had seen that same regret then. "The gods will not give your mother back," he had said. "If they are merciful, they will," she had protested. "They'll resurrect her and take back that awful creature that killed her. The gods have no mercy, that's why they're gods." At last her father exhaled and looked to his guards. "Bear her safely to Casterly Rock, see that she rests once she's there." Then he let her go and surrendered her to his men. Cersei kicked and screamed all the way down the steps toward the docks. She was sure every eye in sight turned to look at her, but she did not care. She hurled insults at her father. She was his daughter, but he sent her away nonetheless, because she was in the way of his perfect plan. He was right, the gods were gods because they were cruel. It was a wonder Tywin Lannister had not yet become a god himself. Tywin had not felt so exhausted in a long time. There was never any rest for him, of course, but lately his ordeals had been far too personal. Dealing with Tyrion, dealing with Cersei, it was all a reminder that the Lannister family was not untouchable. He had a firm grip on Jaime, at least, though Jaime was more upset with him than ever following Cersei's departure. "She's your daughter. You think sending her away will make her any better, or is it just because you can't stand the sight of her anymore?" Angry as it had made him, Jaime was right. Tywin did not think there was hope for Cersei to recover her old self, but to see her stumbling drunk about the keep, caught in her own delusions, it was painful. She looked so much like her mother. For that reason alone, Cersei had always been painful to handle, a headstrong girl with the green eyes of his wife. He hated how she reminded him every day of his losses. Still, she was the only one who took his teachings seriously. Jaime ignored him in favor of swinging about his sword, but Cersei hung on his every word. That was why he was so determined to make her queen. She could have shaped the course of the country. But she didn't, because Cersei thought far too highly of herself and disdained her enemies. Tywin imagined she was mimicking him. She thought that he looked down on every one of his opponents. In truth, he did not overestimate or underestimate anyone if he could help it. He judged them as they were and dealt with them accordingly. Cersei thought she was smarter than everyone else, and that made her weak and easy to manipulate. She would not admit when she had made a mistake until it was too late. And she was blind to the truth once she had created a suitable delusion to replace it. "I should have corrected that sooner," Tywin thought. "If I had known how far this madness would carry her, I might have." He had watched people fall to madness before, but he never expected to watch his daughter take the plunge. "And now she is beyond my power," he thought, "just like Ares, but at least she is not king." In his exhaustion, Tywin wished for only a few days of rest when nothing would happen. But then, the day after Cersei left, Arya Stark knocked on his door. And he could see already in her eyes that she had some trouble to cause as well. Chapter 28. The Wolf Still Has Teeth. This was a bad time to speak to Lord Tywin. Arya was intensely aware of that as she stood in the corner of his office, rolling a Syvas piece in her palm. It was one of the king's, the one with the broken crown. She hadn't meant to bring it here. She had been playing the board all that morning and hadn't really thought of it when she walked from her room on a whim and made her way toward the Tower of the Hand. But Tyrion had given her this board, and for some reason she felt she needed his spirit for strength. She traced the almost sharp edges of the king's broken crown, digging them into her thumb. She watched Tywin, waiting to see if she should speak or leave. Cersei's departure had left him seemingly exhausted. For the briefest second he was vulnerable. Then he glanced at her and remembered himself. His back straightened. His expression hardened. "I hope you're not here to argue with me about the match with Jaime," he said, "because my decision on that is final." "Will arguing do me any good?" Arya asked. "It won't," Tywin said. "Then no, I'm not here to argue about that." She had other words to say, though, a lot of other potentially dangerous words. "It's a good position for you," Tywin said, "better than most could hope for." "Especially the second daughter of a traitor," Arya murmured. She passed the broken king from hand to hand. "Yes, I know how objectively advantageous it is." Tywin nodded, almost distractedly, packing back to his desk. "My children. Between all of them, it seems like a race to see who can burn down the Lannister legacy faster. All three of them have tried. All three of them will fail. The legacy will succeed in spite of them." Arya tapped her thumb against the king's crown. You shouldn't be surprised, though. Tywin shuffled through some papers. What do you mean? By them rebelling, you shouldn't be surprised. Arya looked up at him. Have you played Cyvasse much, my lord? No, I don't have much time for games, Tywin said dismissively. I had an awful lot of time when I first came here, Arya said. Tyrion taught me to play. The goal is to arrange your pieces in just the right way to win the game. Your opponent tries to do the same. It's a game of war on the battlefield. Arya shrugged. You would be good at it, I'm sure. You run your life like an intense game of Cyvasse, except for people aren't game pieces. She squeezed her king tight in her palm, letting its wooden face dig into her skin. So you shouldn't be surprised when they resent you for treating them that way, or when they rebel. Tywin's eyes narrowed. Arya had seen that expression before. She was walking a dangerous line, right on the edge of his tolerance. She had first seen that expression nearly 3 years before, when she looked him in the eye and told him, anyone can be killed. Arya had come a very long way since that day, but she still felt a flash of fear at that expression. She did not lift her chin, though. She did not show her nerves. She stared him down, calm and steady. A house that puts the whims and wishes of its children before the legacy of the family is the house that falls, Tywin said. If they resent me, that doesn't matter. I have to do what is best for the Lannister name, objectively. Maybe, Arya smiled mirthlessly, except you're not objective. What? You're not objective, Arya repeated. You only pretend to be. You pretend that you can judge a situation completely logically, but that's never been true, especially not when it comes to Tyrion. Tywin set down a book a little too hard on the desk. We're not talking about Tyrion. Oh yes we are, Arya said. You were going to send people after him, soldiers, sell swords. You were going to send people after your son for a crime you know he did not commit. You know for sure that he's innocent, but you were going to send people anyway. At least until you realized you could use the situation to blackmail Jaime. I was never going to send people after him, Tywin said. Jaime assumed I would. I'm the one who gave Tyrion a chance to leave in the first place. So you forced him out, forced him to leave his home and live in exile. Explain to me why that's better, Arya asked. He didn't do anything. In fact, he helped me to catch Lord Baelish, the man who tried to assassinate you, and you decided to blame him for Joffrey's death. Would you have preferred me to blame you? Tywin raised his voice. If I told Cersei that I knew for certain Tyrion did not kill Joffrey, I would have to provide her with the true culprit. And even if I didn't, eventually her suspicions would turn to you. Is that what you wanted? Don't turn this on me. Whether or not Cersei would have blamed me is completely irrelevant to you sending Tyrion away. Don't pretend there weren't other ways you could have handled the situation. Arya's hand clenched so tight around the king that she thought she might crush the wood to dust. But you didn't because you wanted a chance to get rid of Tyrion and a chance to manipulate Jaime. Then you don't have to accept a son that you hate as your heir. Even though Tyrion actually wants the position and Jaime doesn't. Now there was real fury in Tywin's eyes, the kind of fury that could shake a room. Perhaps I should let my children do as they please then, as your father did. That worked out very well for him. Now the rage welled up in Arya as well. He knew her weak points just as she knew his, and this was becoming a game of saying the exact worst things. My father didn't die because of his children. He died because of yours, because your daughter couldn't control your awful grandson. She practically spit the words through bared teeth. And yes, I know my father was too honest and honourable, and you think that made him weak, but he knew us. He knew who we were. You know nothing about your children. Careful, girl, Tywin said coldly. You're far overstepping. You forget your place. I don't forget anything. I'm Arya Stark of Winterfell. And my ward, you should remember that as well. Oh, how can I not? Arya asked. You remind me all the time that my life isn't mine. I'm a piece on your board as well, I know, I'm aware. But I still have a tongue and no one is stopping me from using it. Tywin circled around the desk. Without the barrier between them, Arya was suddenly aware of how much taller he was than her. It took everything in her not to take a step back. She planted her feet on the carpet and stayed grounded. I thought you had grown out of that reckless bravery. I see I was mistaken. Don't forget, I have a confession from you. If you're so anxious to prove Tyrion's innocence, then perhaps you would like to face trial for it. Arya lifted her chin. Fine then, right Cersei, do it, I won't stop you. Tywin gave a single mirthless laugh. What a hollow, terrifying sound it was. You've played this game before, pretending you're not afraid to die. I'm not pretending anything. I'm terrified of dying, Arya said. So are you, I've seen it in your eyes. But I was willing to die to kill Joffrey. If he didn't drop from poison, if he sentenced Robb to death, nothing on earth could have stopped me from ripping his throat out. I would have been executed for it, but I would have done it anyway. So go on. Send a messenger after Cersei. Tell her I'll wait. A tense silence hung between them, heavier and more frightening than Arya had ever heard before. In her hand she clutched the broken king like a lifeline. Her hand was trembling, but the rest of her was still. They had both called each other's bluffs, trying to see who would surrender first, and Arya was far too furious to waver. She was a ward to the Lannister family. Her whole life was in his hands, but she did not intend to give in quietly to his demands. She was Arya Stark of Winterfell, and she would be a wolf until the day she died. At last Tywin spoke, but not with a death sentence. He gave her 2 cold, clipped words: "Get out." Arya took a step back, holding his gaze. She let the king slip from her fingers and fall between them on the ground, like a gauntlet thrown in challenge. "Yes, my lord." Then with a mock bow, she turned and strode from the room. Only when she reached the foot of the stairs did she sag against the wall. Her breath left her in one shaky gasp, and she felt a bit dizzy. There were no words, for how stupid that was. Tywin Lannister held her very life in his hands, and she had just dared him to crush it. At that very moment, he was probably thinking of how he could kill her without causing another war. Fine, she didn't care. It felt good to speak truth to the man for once. "The lion has claws, Lord Tywin, but the wolf has powerful jaws and teeth to match." In the aftermath, Arya went to find Jaime. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because she had to talk to someone about what just happened, and Tyrion was no longer here for that. Neither was she, and she certainly wasn't going to speak to the new king about this. Jaime was the only one. Fortunately, he was not hard to find. He was in their practice room, running through his drills, flipping his sword in his hand, the other half of her father's blade. What a beauty it was as it flashed in the light. "Ah, Lady Stark, come to practice." Jaime sheathed his sword. "You look a bit pale." "I'm sure," Arya murmured. "Jaime, if I die in the next few days, it was your father who did it." Jaime blinked rapidly. "My father? Did you do something stupid?" "I said something stupid," Arya said. "Several things, actually." She felt a bit dizzy remembering the conversation. What was she thinking talking to him like that? What made her think a hostage could get away with such words? Jaime rested a hand at her shoulder. "You should sit, you truly look ill." Arya let him guide her to one of the crates. He sat down beside her. "Good, now tell me." Arya did. She told him as much as she could anyway. The only detail she left out was her part in Joffrey's death. Joffrey was his son after all, and she didn't trust him with those words. Not yet. Jaime listened in stunned silence as she recounted the fight, and when she was finished, he let out a long breath, resting back against the wall. "7 hells, Arya. I know. I mean, it's true, everything you said, but that just makes it worse." "I know. I cannot believe you told him that." "Yes, I know," Arya snapped. "I don't know what even came over me. I was angry about Tyrion. That was the main thing, and then I just ended up saying so much more." "You managed to hit just about every sore point for my father," Jaime said. "The only worst thing you could have done is if you had brought up my mother." "Please, Jaime, I have some survival instincts." Arya rested her head between her hands. "Not many, apparently. Do you think he'll kill me, or my family?" "No, you were right to call his bluff. He's always reluctant to change plans once he's made them. And he doesn't want war, and he has his legacy riding on you now." "On you and me, of course," Jaime said. "I'm actually surprised the screaming match wasn't about our engagement." Arya laughed once. "No, I was far more furious about what he did to Tyrion, the blackmail and the manipulations. That's what angered me more than the match itself." She looked up at him. "Not that I'm happy about the match at all. I think I've mentioned to you before I don't want to be married." "Multiple times, yes," Jaime said. "But, and this may surprise you, I don't find you completely awful. As a person, I mean." "Gods, what high praise you give." Arya smacked him on the shoulder. "I just mean, I know who you are. That makes you a better option than most. Your father isn't marrying me to some old man I've never met. Just a slightly old man who I have met." Jaime raised an eyebrow. "Slightly old? You are more than twice my age." "Fair, and I do feel awful about that, believe me." Arya's mouth twitched. "Besides that, You're one of the few lords in Westeros who wouldn't take away my sword, so it's not the worst arrangement in the world. Jaime exhaled. No, I suppose not. And you, she ventured cautiously. Well, I never wanted to marry nor have children, much like you, Jaime said. I thought joining the King's Guard would make me safe from that, but I don't find you completely awful either. He smirked. I'll go a step further and say you are often tolerable. Our affection for each other knows no bounds, Arya said. Jaime looked up at the ceiling with a small smile. Most marriages don't start with much affection. They're political moves, and love isn't political. We don't get to choose who we love. No, Arya supposed that was true. I've never loved anyone, Arya said, and I never really thought anyone would love me. I've always been compared to Sansa. She was the lovable one in my mind, in everybody's mind. You don't look much like your sister, it's true. Jaime glanced at her. You look like your aunt, though. My aunt? Arya asked. Yes, Lyanna Stark. She died before you were born, of course, but I knew her, if only briefly. Jaime laughed once. She wasn't a delicate beauty, but when she disappeared with Rhaegar Targaryen, it started a whole bloody war. There must be something powerful about a woman who can do that. You think I'm going to start a war? Arya raised an eyebrow. Will men raise their armies for me, the great beauty of House Stark? Well, who knows, you're young. You have plenty of time to start wars, Jaime grinned. Arya stared up at the ceiling. I'll put that on my list of ambitions then. Good, Jaime said. The point is, so long as we're stuck in an engagement neither of us want, we can agree to be decent to each other. That will make life bearable enough. Arya nodded once. Yes. I can agree to be decent. Good, Jaime stood. And now I think we should practice. You wanted to learn how to swing a knight's sword. I can teach you some things. Arya smiled slightly. Fighting was just what she needed to take her mind off of her great fight with Tywin. But even as she practiced, she could not shake the sinking feeling in her gut, the realization that she may have fallen out of the Lord of House Lannister's good graces. He was her captor, the man who had control over her entire life. By all accounts, he was a cruel, ruthless, awful man. So why did it bother her, losing his favor? Why did she care? Chapter 29, The First Year of Winter. 2 days after Arya had rather unwisely snapped at Tywin, the first snow fell at King's Landing. It did not stick to the ground for long, but it was a reminder that the winter had truly come to the south. It was soothing to Arya's very soul to feel the bite of the cold air again. When everyone else had abandoned the gardens, she sat outside and let the snow fall all around her. She breathed in deep and thought of home. Over the next few months, the snow fell more often and the air grew colder. Snowdrifts built up along the castle walls, and the flurries blanketed the gardens in white. Arya watched the snow pile from her window and often walked amongst it, leaving footprints in the white expanse. And all the while she did not speak to Tywin Lannister. She saw him when she went to court, sitting beside Tommen as the young king addressed the concerns of the peasants. It was a challenge for one's first year as king to also be their first winter. Tywin helped Tommen when he did not know how to reply. But those were the only times she saw him. He did not call her to the Tower of the Hand on any business. He did not retaliate for the argument, but he also seemed to be ignoring her existence entirely. As much as Arya loved the cold in King's Landing, the winter brought with it strange isolation. Just a short time ago she had Tyrion and she, but they had left together on the ship, taking with them Bronn and Podrick as well. In the beginning, when the snow was still fresh, Tommen ventured out occasionally to watch the flakes. He had never truly seen snow after all. Arya was fortunate enough to watch his face light up at the sight. The crown and everything that came with it had weighed down his smiles as of late, but sometimes Arya caught glimpses of the old Tommen. It's amazing that something so beautiful causes so much trouble, Tommen said. I hear it snows even in summer in the north. It does, Arya said. Summer snows, they're one of the things I miss the most about home. It must be very cold up there now. I'm not sure how the Northmen cope. Tommen shivered under the gust of an icy wind. We're made of strong stuff, Your Grace, Arya smiled. Our blood keeps us warm. It doesn't keep most people warm, Tommen said. Grandfather says that there will be many problems to deal with in the winter. A lot of people will die. A lot of people will run out of food. He says it's inevitable. If the North keeps our people alive in the winter, the South can do the same, Arya muttered. Lord Tywin is just being cynical as always. Tommen gave her a look. Did you and my grandfather have a disagreement? Arya crossed her arms, staring intently at a nearby hedge. What makes you ask that? Well, he's been colder than usual over the past few days, and once when Varys mentioned your name during the small council meetings, he seemed rather angry. It's nothing, Arya said. Nothing you need to worry about, Your Grace. I can handle it myself. How are you going to handle it? I'm going to avoid him until he forgets the disagreement happened. I don't think grandfather forgets anything. Then I will avoid him until he dies of old age, and I won't have to worry about it anymore. The conversations with Tommen were welcome, but they died as the winter truly settled over King's Landing. After a few months she barely spoke to him at all. He was too busy to venture into the gardens, and the wind was too cold for a summer-born boy like him. The winter also saw the exit of the flowers, the ones in the garden and many of those that came from High Garden. Lady Olenna and her household set out to return home soon after the first snows, but she did manage to catch Arya one more time in conversation when she crossed paths with her in the courtyard just before they left. It has been a pleasure to watch you, Lady Stark, Olenna said, clasping Arya's hand between her wrinkled palms. You've had an intriguing effect on this place. It's rather a shame I can't stay to see more of it. I'm sorry to see you go, Arya said. Oh, I don't think you care much either way, Olenna said. Margaery does like you, though. It was her hope to betroth you to Laura's, and I thought it was a rather good idea as well. Arya blinked rapidly. Eyes, what? Oh, you wouldn't have heard of these plans, Olenna said, and Lord Tywin sadly murdered them in their crib, though I must say engaging you to his son. She patted Arya's hand. I did not expect that. Neither did I, Arya thought. I wonder if he's regretting that now. Well, it puts you in an ideal position, Olenna said. Here your casting ripples through the keep. With enough power, you'll cast monstrous waves. Arya's mouth twitched. Thank you, Lady Olenna, it's kind of you to say. Not kind, just true, Olenna said. Continue to play your cards right, Lady Arya. Don't fold a good hand like this. Arya watched the Tyrell caravan pulled away, thinking of those words, wondering if she already had folded her hand. One moon into winter, the gardens emptied completely, and Arya was left with very few companions. The only person who seemed to share her feeling of isolation was Jaime. He was released from his vows as a king's guard, and thus was relieved of many of his old duties. With that he had more free time, but neither of his siblings around to share it with. Tyrion was across the sea and Cersei was at Casterly Rock. So in those winter months they spent a surprising amount of time in each other's company. They sparred mostly. Fighting was an escape for the both of them, and they each wanted to get stronger. Better. Jaime was improving greatly with his left hand, but Arya had improved along with him. She would never match his strength, but she learned how to use hers. 3 moons after the first snow, Arya bled for the first time. She woke from fitful sleep in a puddle of red, her midsection cramping horribly, but she knew how to act through pain. She rose quickly and cut away the bloody sheets. She changed her soiled clothes as well, put every stained piece of cloth together and wrapped them in a layer of clean sheets. Later she would find a good place to burn them. It wasn't the bleeding that worried her. Arya had bled from wounds plenty of times in her 15 years, but she knew what this kind of bleeding meant. When she married, she would be fit to bear children. There wasn't a point in hiding it, she knew. Someone would find out. And Tywin planned to marry her to Jaime as soon as she came of age, but she didn't want to give him a reason to push the wedding forward. She was enjoying her last months as Arya Stark. Fortunately, Tywin was ignoring her at the moment, so he had no need to find out. She wasn't why everyone called Moon's blood the red flower. It made it sound graceful and dainty. Instead it was messy, inconvenient and painful. It cut Arya's stamina in half and occasionally made her feel ill, which meant, while she could hide it from most people, it was absolutely impossible to hide from Jaime. You're pale, Jaime said that afternoon after Arya had nearly stumbled dodging one of his strikes. Do you need to sit? No, Arya muttered. I'm just fine. She went to hit him again, but when he dodged she very nearly lost her footing. He caught her shoulder before she could. Are you sure? Arya cursed under her breath. All right, a short break. She stalked away and leaned up against the wall, gratefully sinking to the ground. Why did it feel like she had been stabbed? You may need a maester, Jaime pointed out. You're not usually like this. No, Arya said a little too loudly. I mean, that's all right, it's not fatal, I promise. Jaime studied her for a long moment, then he nodded once. Ah, I see. You don't see anything, Arya muttered. I may not be a woman, but I do know how a woman's body works, Jaime said. You could have taken a break from sparring today, you know. My teacher always said practice should be consistent. Well, that was when you didn't bleed once a month. Arya let out a shaky breath. Don't tell anyone. I won't, Jaime said. But if you're worried about my father moving up the wedding, he won't. He has a plan in mind. If he was in a hurry, we would be married already. Arya nodded, running a hand through her hair. Have you spoken with him? Jaime asked. Since that day, I mean. No, it seems we've both been effectively avoiding that, Arya said. I always tried to walk a line with him, but I crossed it that day, and then dared him to do something about it. If I was in your father's favour before, I've fallen from it now. I'm not sure about that, Jaime said. His favour is probably the only reason you're still alive. The months continued to pass. Arya grew used to her moon sickness and to Tywin Lannister's silence. The winter was not as severe as many had predicted. Some even said that they would be in for an early spring. Others said that any spring that came would be a false one, followed by a harder winter. But while the temperatures were less severe, sickness proved a more dangerous foe than cold. They called it Long Summer's Bane. It brought with it an awful cough, high fever, and in many cases death. The last summer had lasted so many years that it made everyone more susceptible to this new winter's sickness, particularly children. They died by the thousands all over the kingdom. Some are children who had only just seen their first snow. But adults were not immune either. There were even some lords and ladies at court who perished, and the king's own executioner caught the disease. Arya had tried not to smile when she heard of Elyn Payne's passing, another name off of her list. She imagined that some of the others had died too. Polliver, the Hound, the Mountain. As they were far out of her sight, she imagined the sickness had erased them. That would make her list much shorter. Only 2 names that she knew for sure were alive. Cersei Lannister. Tywin Lannister. Arya did not catch the illness. She was a northerner in the south, used to this kind of cold. However, up north the plague was apparently awful. In the severe temperatures, Long Summer's Bane carried off many children's lives. In the 9th month after the snows began, Arya received a letter from home. She was with Jaime when Grand Maester Pycelle delivered it, and even before she split the seal, she felt the plunge of dread in her gut. She read the words of the letter 3 times before she absorbed the words. Long Summer's Bane had come to Winterfell and carried off Rickon with it. Rickon, her baby brother. He was only 6 years old when she and Sansa left Winterfell. It had been nearly 4 years since Arya had last seen him. He would have been 9. No, 10. He had already survived a siege as a hostage, but the winter took him. It was too cruel to even imagine. Arya sank to the floor when she read the letter a 4th time, confirming her fears. Tears began to well up inside of her, but she tried to shove them down. Lady Arya, Jaime stood over her. What is it? She handed him the letter to read because she didn't trust herself to speak. He skimmed it over in silence. Rickon, he murmured, the youngest. Arya nodded once. I'm sorry, Jaime said. The last time I saw him, he was crying at Sansa and I not to leave him, Arya murmured. I told him not to cry, that we'd see him again, so it was stupid to cry. I didn't know. 2 tears trailed down her cheek and she hurried to wipe them away. You couldn't have known, Jaime murmured. No one could have predicted what an awful mess everything would become. I told him I would see him again. It wasn't your fault that you didn't make it back. Arya looked up at him. He was right, of course, but still, she had been down south for far too long. She should have made an effort to return sooner than this. I have to go home, Jaime. I have to see his grave. She swallowed hard. I have to mourn him. Jaime studied her for a long moment. Well, we are at peace with the North. I don't suppose there would be any harm in you making a visit. He sighed. But it's not up to me. No, it wasn't up to him. Arya rested her head between her hands. Fuck, I have to talk to him, don't I? Jaime let out a single sad laugh. Yes, Arya, you do. It had been nearly a year since Arya had climbed the Tower of the Hand. She lingered at the foot of the steps for a while, staring up the winding passage. How many times had she made this climb? More than she could count. When she first came to King's Landing, her father occupied this office, and she had climbed to visit him several times. In the past 3 years, it had become Lord Tywin's office instead, and she came when he called. because she was his hostage. Hostages were not supposed to speak their mind to their captors, but for a while it had seemed her speaking her mind had amused him. When he allowed her honesty, she grew more and more comfortable making her thoughts known. Then she took things a step too far. She wondered not for the first time if he had thought about calling her bluff, throwing her to the lions and letting her stand trial for Joffrey's death. Surely it must have crossed his mind. 11 months later, she stood here again, needing to ask him for something important. How unfortunate that she had ran through all of her goodwill with him. Arya took a deep breath and climbed the stairs. She had put this off for too long. He was writing letters when she entered because of course he was. He did not look up at the creak of the door. Arya stood in the center of the room, keeping absolutely still, waiting, watching. Tywin was always fond of letting silences drag on, but this was perhaps the longest Arya had ever endured. The anticipation ate away at her, and she wanted nothing more than to shift from foot to foot like a child caught doing wrong. But she couldn't. She had to stand strong. At the same time, she kept her gaze slightly lowered. If she was going to get something from Tywin today, she couldn't fight him for it, so she stared at his desk instead of at him. She was surprised to see Tyrion's Sivas piece sitting on the edge with its still broken crown. She hadn't even known why she left it there. "What do you want?" Tywin asked at last. The sudden break in the silence startled Arya. She tore her eyes away from the king to see him looking up at her. I came because..." Her voice came out soft and she cursed herself for it. "I have a request." Tywin did not reply, but he did not tell her to leave either. His expression was utterly unreadable. "I just received word that my youngest brother is dead," Arya continued. "The long summer's bane took him, and she steeled herself. "I would like to go home just for a short time. I haven't been home in 4 years. I need to pay my respects." Still he didn't reply. He regarded her as if turning the request about in his mind. Then he went back to writing his letters. Arya gritted her teeth together. He was toying with her and it made her furious. Her little brother was dead and she was in no mood for games, but she couldn't snap at him. She knew better than that. "My lord, I'm not plotting an escape of any kind. I will return to King's Landing, but, please." The silence persisted, filled only by the sound of his quill scratching against paper. "If this is about 11 months ago, I'm sorry, what I said." "You're not sorry," he interrupted. "You're apologizing because you're desperate, nothing more. You're not sorry for any of it." Arya opened her mouth to reply, but he kept talking. "It doesn't matter. I'll let you go." Arya blinked in surprise. "Really?" "Yes," Tywin said. "Jaime will accompany you, so will some of our household guard for protection on the road." "And to make sure I come back," Arya said. "Thought is sending Jaime with me. Wise. Any act against him would be an act of war, which your brother should be smart enough to avoid," Tywin said. "And if he is not smart enough to prevent a conflict, then I assume you will be." Arya nodded once. She wasn't going to start a war. Tywin had more allies, more resources, and the benefit of the winter drawing to a close. He would have the advantage in any war that began. "So you will go north, stay for a fortnight, then return," Tywin said. "By that time your 16th name day will have arrived, and you will marry Jaime." He finished his letter and carefully folded the paper. "Is that clear?" Arya nodded once. "Yes, my lord." Tywin sealed the letter and held it out to her. "Deliver this to your brother Robb directly. It is for his eyes only." Arya nodded once and accepted the letter. "I'll take it to him." "Good," Tywin nodded at the door. "Go." Arya did not stay or argue. She turned and hurried from the room before the man could change his mind. Only when she was out of his line of sight did she let out a breath. She had never heard such an indifferent tone in Lord Tywin's voice, almost as if he had forgotten completely about their argument. But she knew that wasn't true. Lannisters never forgot anything. It didn't matter, though. The impending marriage to Jaime didn't matter either. Finally, after so many long years, Arya was going home. Chapter 30, The Road Home. At Winterfell, Maester Luwin spoke of a soon-to-come spring. An end to the winter everyone said would be the worst in living memory. True winter in the north had not even lasted 2 years yet. It was not nearly as awful as everyone had said, but Sansa found it difficult to feel joy at the promise of spring in a few moons. Winter had robbed the north of so many summer-born children, and with them, Rickon. 7 days ago they had buried him in the crypt next to their father. Sansa's mother had wept openly. Sansa wished she had cried just as hard, but her time in King's Landing had wrung her dry of tears. Even after years at home, it still did not feel safe to cry. This war had taken much from them. The North was tattered from the conflict. Her father was dead and her younger brother had joined him. Bran was crippled. Robb was aged from his role as Lord of Winterfell, and Sansa still felt like a shell of her former self. She hardly remembered the soft, sweet girl who had left Winterfell. And Arya, well, she was miles away, trapped in King's Landing, the place where their father had died. Who knew how time in that place had changed her? At the very least, Joffrey was no longer around to torment her. What joy Sansa had felt when Robb brought news of that wretched boy's end. She never thought death would taste so sweet to her. The taste had soured again, though. Thinking of Rickon in his last days, sick with fever, it made it hard to eat. It weighed heaviest on her mother. Sansa could see grief etched in her face and her slumped shoulders. Even now, as they sat side by side, repairing the stitches on some of their gowns, Sansa noticed her mother's fingers trembling. "Do you need help?" Sansa asked softly. Catelyn Stark shook her head. "No, old fingers shake sometimes, don't worry yourself." Sansa sighed and went back to her own stitching. The door opened and Robb burst suddenly through. "Mother, I'm sorry, I should have knocked, I just thought you would want to know." Sansa's brow furrowed. His face was happy, happier than she'd seen it since before Rickon came down with sickness. "What is it?" her mother asked, not looking up from her work. "If it's any terrible news, I'm not sure I can stomach it right now, Robb." "It's not terrible," Robb said. "A raven from the capital, Arya, is coming home." Sansa's eyes widened. Her mother lost her grip on her needle and gown, letting it slide off onto the floor. She placed a hand over her mouth. "Gods, do you mean it?" "Yes," Robb said. "She heard about Rickon and asked permission to return to honour him. Lord Tywin granted it, only for a fortnight and with a small host of Lannister guards, but she's coming." Sansa watched her mother smile for the first time in weeks. "Oh, Arya, it will be good to have her here even for a few minutes." She stood. "We should make things ready for her." "You can leave that to Talisa and me," Robb said. "There's no need to strain yourself." "I am not so weak that I required bed rest," Catelyn replied, "and Talisa has Lyanna and little Ben to take care of." True enough, Robb and Talisa's daughter was a year and a half and Ben, named for their uncle, was half a year old, and required quite a bit of care. The oldest, little Ned, was just shy of 4 years old. Sansa had been helping quite a bit with the children to take her mind off of Rickon. "As you wish," Robb said. He watched as their mother swept from the room. Sansa finished her last stitch before she stood. It will be good to see Arya again. It's strange that they should allow her to visit. Suppose she decided to run. "I suppose that's why they sent the guards," Robb said. "Jaime Lannister rides with her as well." Sansa's brow furrowed. "That's stranger still." "It could be his father wants to inspect things in the north, make sure we're still truly loyal. Tywin Lannister is fond of tests," Robb said. "Though he comes at a dangerous time. His visit might intersect with the arrival of the Northern Lords." That was right. They were less than a month away from winter's second year, and the first year of true winter. It was the time for the Northern Lords to gather at Winterfell and take stock of their losses and what they would need to survive the coming months. The Northmen would not be happy to see Jaime Lannister. "If it does, we'll just have to hide the Lannister soldiers away," Robb said at last. "I don't want the Karstarks seeing even a strand of golden hair. Relations with them are tentative enough as it is." "Yes," Sansa agreed. "I don't want to think about that right now. I'm just glad we'll have Arya back with us. It means she was able to adapt. If she was as wild as she was 4 years ago, they would have her locked in a cage for fear of her snapping at someone important." "No cage, it seems," Robb said. "Just a leash. Still, we will have to be careful as long as Jaime Lannister is around. We don't want to say anything he deems treasonous." "Don't worry," Sansa murmured with a bitter smile. "I've had lots of practice at keeping my thoughts to myself." Arya Stark was clearly happy to be returning home, but Jaime was more nervous than anything else. He had not been back to Winterfell since she had, and he didn't much like the place. Time as a northern prisoner made him wary of Robb Stark and his allies. And then, of course, there was Bran Stark. It would have been quite a bit simpler if the sickness had claimed that boy instead. Years ago, when Bran had seen him with Cersei, he shoved the boy out the window and crippled him. It was a hasty decision, a bad decision, but he made it out of fear that their secret would be revealed to King Robert. The boy had woken up with no memory of the incident, but what if he had recalled it again? What if he saw Jaime and remembered in a flash of panic the man who almost killed him? Peace or no peace, Robb Stark might kill him on the spot, and if he didn't, Arya would do the job. He supposed if Bran Stark had remembered, he would have heard by now. He would avoid the boy if he could. He would avoid all of the Starks if he could. He had managed to at least win Arya's trust and tolerance, but he doubted he would have much luck with the rest of them. Especially if they found out about his engagement to their sister. Arya's mood was much better than his. Despite her brother's death, she felt a clear freedom being away from the capital. She had donned breeches for riding, and a warm cloak of green and gold over her deep grey tunic. She looked something of a perfect mix between House Stark and House Lannister in that moment. He wondered if she knew it. She was barely recognisable as the scrawny, boyish child that served as his father's cupbearer 4 years ago. She could not hope to pass for a boy now, even if she did cut her hair again. If not for the 2 swords hanging at her hip, she would look like any proper lady. Of course. She had insisted on taking both of her blades, in case she met with trouble on the road. When Jaime had asked if she intended to wield both in each hand, she shook her head. No, I will choose between them depending on how I feel. How you feel? Yes, if I feel like stabbing someone or taking off their head. And the knife up your sleeve. For if I want to cut someone's throat. Jaime's mouth twitched when he remembered it. A few moons from now, that strange, sometimes terrifying girl would be his wife. He had not quite wrapped his mind around that yet. Jaime had never wanted to marry. He had only ever wanted Cersei. They were born together, grew up together. He had given up his chance at inheritance a long time ago because he only wanted his sister. There were parts of him that still longed for Cersei, or at least the Cersei who once was. Time had turned her drunk and cold and borderline mad. He feared the person she had become, and he had not seen her since she had returned to Casterly Rock. But he longed for the Cersei he had before the war, before life had changed her. She's not coming back, he told himself often. She's gone too far over the edge. She won't be as she was. Nothing was as it was, not even Jaime himself. Losing his hand had hollowed out parts of Jaime's soul. He had to confront his own weakness, something he hated doing. Arya Stark had forced him to confront it. She had hit him until he fought back, hit him until he found his soul again in his left hand. They kept a quick pace north. Most nobles would stop often at various castles along the way, but Arya had no desire to linger with nobles or delay her return to Winterfell. The further they got from King's Landing, however, the more contemplative and almost nervous Arya seemed to become. The initial high of freedom had faded, and now she seemed to dread what was ahead. You seem a bit at war with yourself, Lady Stark, Jaime said one cold morning. They had passed into the riverlands and snow drifts grew increasingly more unforgiving, but the sun had come out to give them a respite from the snowfall. If you don't mind me noticing. I do mind, Arya muttered. Jaime raised an eyebrow and she sighed. But, you're right, I'm nervous to go home. Why, Jaime asked. Your family will be happy to see you. I've been gone for so long. Everything has changed since I left. I wonder how much of the old me I still have. She looked down at her hands. What if I'm not what they expect? What if they barely know me anymore? Well, I remember what you were like when I first met you. Outspoken, impulsive, occasionally stupid. He smirked. That part of you is still there. I've gotten much better about all of those things, Arya protested. Really, because according to your conversation with my father several months ago. That was an exception. Arya sighed and looked up at the sky. I'm not sure why he let me leave King's Landing after that. I thought he would deny any request I made on principle. He might have if this trip didn't suit him, Jaime said, but it allowed him to set a clear date for the wedding. And you're acting as a trustworthy courier for that letter he gave you. My father can hold a grudge, but he usually does things with purpose. He's still angry at me, Arya said. He didn't say it. His voice didn't even change. I just felt it in the air. Jaime studied her. Does that bother you, Lady Arya? No, she said almost too quickly. Obviously not. He can be angry at me if he wants. I'm his hostage. I have more right to be angry at him. So it does bother you, Jaime said. It was a statement, not a question. She glared at him. I just said it didn't. I know, you're lying, Jaime said. He almost laughed at the look she was giving him. If a glare could kill. You know, some of us spent quite some time trying to convince you that you had my father's favour. I saw it immediately. Tyrion saw it immediately. Cersei saw it too, which only made her hate you more. and most importantly Aunt Jenna saw it. She and Uncle Kevin are the foremost authorities on my father. What does that have to do with anything? Arya asked. Because at the same time we could see that he had your favor too, Jaime said. Arya's jaw clenched. She really was just as stubborn as his father, and just as unwilling to admit any sort of weakness. It was no wonder they used to get along. You're wrong, he doesn't have any of my favor. Jaime smirked. You always get angry when you're defensive and lying. Arya fell silent, her expression sullen. I understand, you feel guilty about it. He is the head of the Lannisters after all. The enemy of your family, Jaime said. But he also gave you a sword and he doesn't force you into the mold of a perfect lady, so it's all a bit conflicting for you. If you have everything so figured out, then why ask? Arya asked. I'm not asking, I'm telling, Jaime said. Anyhow, you're not alone. Everyone hates my father at least a little bit, even his family, but he has a way of making you want his approval nonetheless. When you actually meet his expectations, it's an addicting feeling. He shrugged. And you meet his expectations more than most. I can understand why you would favor him in spite of yourself, and why it bothers you to be out of his favor now. Arya studied her hands. Her expression had gone from angry to pensive. Tyrion is supposed to be the one who understands people, not you. He's my brother. I learned from him, Jaime said. He hadn't heard anything from Tyrion since he left. He liked to assume that was good news. He imagined Tyrion finally travelling the world, free from his father's expectations. He had always wanted to see Essos after all. They lapsed into silence for another few hours as they travelled along the King's Road. It wasn't until they stopped to rest for the night at an inn that she renewed the topic. I've hated the name Lannister more than any other, she said. The way my father talked about you all, said your names, it was easy to think of you all as monsters in human skin. Jaime could believe that. Ned Stark said the name Lannister like it was poison, and Kingslayer like Jaime was some devil. Then after all that happened, it only became easier to hate your family, Arya continued. When I met your father, I wanted to put a knife through his back, and when I came back to the keep, I did not want to like any of you. I resolved to hate every single Lannister. Then you all started making it so damn difficult. Tyrion was kind to me, but he didn't treat me like some fragile lady. You sparred with me and didn't take away my sword. Tommen talked to me as if he didn't even know I was a daughter of a traitor. He wanted to make me feel welcome. You sound like we did something awful by treating you kindly, Jaime said. You did, Arya said. You forced me reconsider everything I felt. Do you know how hard that is? Hate is a comfortable emotion. It's consistent. I hated Joffrey and I hated Cersei. At least they had the good grace not to prove me wrong. Jaime raised an eyebrow. And my father. Arya looked up at him. Your father didn't treat me kindly. Worse, he took me seriously. Almost no one in my whole life has taken me seriously. When they saw me playing knight, they laughed and assumed I would grow out of it. Even my family was like that. Wild Arya, it's just a child's phase. She will move past this. In the beginning, you and Tyrion also looked at me as a girl playing a game with a sword. Don't try to deny it. I won't, Jaime said. You're right, that's exactly how I saw you. I can count on one hand the number of people who took me seriously from the very first, without me having to ask for it, without me having to fight for it, Arya murmured. My brother Jon, my first teacher Syrio Fall. She twisted her fingers about each other. And your father. I see, Jaime said. What a thing that was for her to admit. He imagined even her own father, who she loved so dearly, had expected her to grow into dresses and sewing needles one day. And that won him your favour more than a kindness ever could. Arya shrugged. Not that it matters now. I burned a bridge with Lord Tywin. I'll never have his favour again, which is for the best. Is it? Jaime asked. Yes, Arya murmured. It makes everything less confusing. Chapter 31, Winterfell. As the snowdrifts climbed and the temperatures dropped, Arya began to recognise the countryside. Travel had been slow because of the winter, but after just shy of a month of riding, they were finally close to Winterfell again. Arya knew these woods and these fields. She used to go riding here whenever she could, and when she couldn't, she stared out at the expanse from the walls of Winterfell and breathed in the familiar air. They were close, so close. Then, as they came over the crest of the snowy hill, she saw it, the familiar walls with the direwolf sigil flapping at the towers, Winterfell. How young she was when she last left her home, only 12 years old and so naive about the evil in the world. She had read about evil in her books and dreamed about conquering it one day, sword in hand, but she had never truly understood it. She had not met evil until she met Joffrey on the riverbank. The girl Arya was 4 years ago had liked to think of herself as tough and untouchable, invincible, but that girl had not seen battle or death, she had not killed. Melancholy and nostalgia wove themselves together in her heart as she looked on. How bittersweet it was to return. "You're home, Lady Arya," Jaime murmured from beside her. Arya nodded once and urged her horse into a canter. The Lannister guards followed close behind. She could not reach the gate fast enough in her mind. All of her nerves disappeared, at least for a moment. Home, home, she was home. A large shape blocked her path and her horse squealed and slid to a stop. The other horses stopped behind her as well. "Seven hells," one of the Lannister soldiers cursed. "What is that?" "Now I know we're in Stark country," Jaime muttered under his breath. "That's a direwolf." It was, in fact, it was a rather familiar direwolf to Arya. Greywind. She had not seen him since he was small, but she recognized his colouring well. He stared straight at her, his eyes calm. There was blood on his muzzle from a recent hunt. One of the Lannister soldiers started to draw his bow and he growled, raising his haunches. "Wait," Arya said. "Put your bow away." "I'm not eager to lose my arm," the soldier protested. "Then you'll put your bow away before I cut it off," Arya snapped. She hopped off her skittish horse, handing the reins to Jaime. "Arya, I don't recommend this," Jaime said slowly. "Recommend what?" "Whatever you're about to do." Arya sighed. "Trust me, it will be all right." Then she turned and stepped toward Greywind. With the Lannister guard's bow stowed away, his shoulders had relaxed again. He did not flinch or bar his teeth when Arya approached. He just watched her. The direwolves had such intelligent eyes. A few feet in front of him, Arya sank to her knees on the snow-covered road. "Hey boy," she murmured. "It's me. Do you remember me?" For a moment, Greywind didn't move and Arya held her breath. She wondered if she even smelled familiar to him anymore, if he recalled her after so long a time. But then he closed the distance between them, sniffing her face. She reached out and gently stroked the fur of his neck, and he did not shy away. Arya very nearly cried as she wrapped her arms around his great neck and buried her face in his fur. Even after years away, wolves never forgot their pack. Sansa stood in the courtyard with the rest of her family, waiting to receive her sister. They were in a line, Robb, the Lord of Winterfell, Talisa, his wife, then their mother and Sansa herself. Meanwhile, the young ones, little Ned, Lyanna and Ben, were with the new scepter, unable to stay for too long in the freezing air. Bran was inside for the same reason. The wind made his chair far too cold, and Maester Luwin said he was more susceptible to illness. They were surrounded by their household guard, including Brienne of Tarth. The Lady Warrior had remained the sworn sword of the Stark household for the past several years, but she especially looked after Sansa and her mother. When she heard the Lannisters would be coming, she was especially determined to do her duty. "I won't have them make any trouble here," Brienne said. "If any of them try, I will knock them into the snow." "We'll try to avoid fighting if we can," Sansa said, "especially with Jaime Lannister." "That man loves to pick fights whenever possible," Brienne said. "I would know, he was my prisoner for a time, but as you say, I won't let him goad me." "Good," Sansa said. "I'm more worried about Robb than you if I'm being honest." Still, Sansa did feel safer with Brienne as her guard. She was an astonishingly tall woman and had all the strength that Sansa lacked, and she reminded Sansa quite a bit of Arya's fighting spirit. She hoped that Arya still had that spirit. The gates opened and Sansa drew in a deep breath. It was a similar scene to over 4 years ago, just on a smaller scale. A long-awaited arrival. Lannister colours passing through the gate, but it was a far smaller group of visitors this time, and many people from that day were dead and gone. Her father, her youngest brother, Sir Roderick, Jory and all of her father's household guard, Robert Baratheon, Joffrey. The winter had many casualties, most of them bad. But Arya rode at the head of the small group atop a midnight black horse. She wore breeches, which was not at all surprising for Arya, but the rest of her clothing actually looked quite fine-befitting a noble lady. Her hair was tossed by the winter wind, and longer than Sansa had ever seen before. She carried herself taller, with a straight back and her head held high. She really had grown up from Sansa's annoying little sister. Arya swung off her horse and landed gracefully on the ground, handing the reins off to a stable boy. She approached them slowly at first, almost cautiously. She stopped in front of Robb, dipping into a little curtsy. Lord Stark. Robb raised an eyebrow. Lord Stark. Arya raised her head, a little smirk coming to her face. That expression was distinctly Arya. I'm just trying to be proper. Robb laughed once and welcomed her into his arms, holding on tightly. Sansa's heart felt a little lighter at that. Yes, this was still her sister, even after years trapped in King's Landing. Arya had not let them break her. No sooner had Robb released her from his hug, their mother swept in for an embrace. My sweet girl, is that really you? Yes, I promise. Arya's voice broke a bit. I'm just a few inches taller. More than that, Catelyn pulled back, brushing her hair from her face. You've grown up, Arya, you're beautiful. Arya's cheeks reddened slightly at the words. She was not accustomed to be called that, Sansa knew. Oh, am I? I wouldn't lie, their mother smiled and kissed her on the forehead. Not after all of this time. Arya, Robb said as Catelyn stepped back. You have not met my wife, this is Talisa. A pleasure. Lady Talisa. Arya dipped into a quick curtsy. She had gotten much better at that, and the courtesy sounded more natural from her lips. I'm happy to finally meet you. And are you, Lady Arya? Talisa smiled. I've heard so much about you from your brother. He says you're one of the bravest people he has ever known. You must be brave yourself, to enter the Stark family in such times, Arya said. Did you have hard winters where you come from? Nothing like this, Talisa said. I'm adjusting. I am too. I've been down south for too long, Arya said. You have, Sansa spoke up. You were always more suited to the cold than I. Arya turned toward her, her smile softening. You look like you're doing fine. And gods, did you have to get so much taller? I grew a few inches and you grew half a foot. Sansa couldn't help but laugh, drawing Arya into a hug. You look well. You must have listened to my advice. Half of the time, Arya said. Just enough to make it this far, but I'm still very much myself. I can certainly tell that, Sansa pulled back. Has anyone noticed that Arya is carrying a sword? She's carrying 2 swords, Robb said. Travel on the road is difficult. Arya lifted her chin. Shouldn't I defend myself? Isn't that the purpose of the guards? Their mother asked. Lady Arya would never leave it to other people to protect her. Sansa turned to see Jaime Lannister approaching, almost cautiously. He had lingered a little ways back, as if not knowing how to speak to the Starks. Sansa supposed that made sense. He had been a prisoner of Robb's for some time. There was little warmth between them. Lannister, Robb said coolly, I hope the trip was not too difficult for you. No, not so difficult, Jaime said. I hope my stay here will be just as easy. That depends on you, Robb replied. For a moment there was silence between them and Arya looked on tensely. Jaime cast her a glance before he exhaled. I have no quarrel with you anymore, Lord Stark. He extended his left hand. Let's make peace for now. Robb hesitated for only a moment before he accepted. Yes, for now. Winterfell has suffered too much death already. He glanced down. Is something wrong with your right hand, sir? Yes, it's missing. Kind of you to notice, Jaime said. I lost it at the Battle of Dragonstone. I hear Stannis perished at that battle, Brienne spoke up from behind Sansa. Jaime turned as if noticing her for the first time and grinned. Indeed he did, Lady Brienne. That must make you happy. I'm afraid I didn't do the deed myself. It does not matter who killed him as long as justice was served, Brienne said flatly. Ah, you haven't changed. That's good, Jaime glanced at Arya. You should spar with that one if you get the chance. You'll enjoy it, trust me. Arya's mouth twitched into a smile, but she looked nervous, as if she was waiting for him or someone to say the wrong thing. I don't suppose you will be sparring with Brienne, Robb said. It must be difficult to fight with your left hand. Jaime did not take the bait of the comment. Strange. Brienne said that he liked to pick fights. I manage well enough, your sister saw to that. Robb gave Arya a look and Arya shrugged, looking suddenly nervous. I like to spar. I practiced with him sometimes. Jaime glanced at her, a small question in his eyes, and Arya shook her head once. They were speaking without saying any words, passing some secret between them that Arya clearly did not want to say out loud. We should get out of this cold, Sansa broke in, feeling the sudden instinct to rescue her sister. I'm sure Arya is weary from the journey. Yes, Arya said, looking grateful for a reason to step away, and I'd like to see Bran. I'll take you to him, Sansa said, looping her arm through hers. Excuse us, everyone. Sansa wasn't sure why Arya had seemed to freeze when Robb and James spoke, but she knew that Arya rarely froze, not unless she was hiding something. What she was hiding, Sansa could not begin to know, but she guessed that in her 4 years away from home, Arya had acquired more than a few secrets. It was only after greeting her family that Arya truly realized how many things she did not know how to tell them. How did she explain her second sword, for one thing? How did she explain Tywin Lannister giving her a sword without explaining all of the events that led up to that gift? How did she explain that her new sword was one half of ice, her father's sword which by all rights should have been Robb's? How did she explain Joffrey's death without revealing the role she played in it? And how in the world could she tell them about her engagement to Jaime without starting a fight? Arya knew Tywin had not informed her family of the match, and though there were rumours in the capital, she doubted many of them had come all the way to the north. Her family did not deal in spies after all. Maybe Lord Tywin expected her to break the news on this visit, which she did not want to do. If Robb found out, he might try to murder Jaime, which was a sure course back to war. If she could help it, Arya wanted to avoid causing yet another major conflict between the Lannisters and the Starks. It would be best perhaps to keep quiet about everything, but they would ask questions, she knew that. She had become a much better liar, but she did not want to deceive her family. Bran was sitting in the great hall, his chair in front of a window so that he could look out at the snow. There was a large book in his lap and a stack of others beside him. Summer curled up beside his chair, keeping a watchful eye at the door. His great head rose when he saw Arya enter and he let out a little whine. Bran turned and smiled. I heard the commotion and figured you were here. Arya smiled and rushed to Bran's side, hugging him tightly. It's good to see you awake. Before we left, I was still unconscious. That's right, Bran sighed. We never got to say a proper goodbye. At least we got to see each other again. Arya pulled back from him. Summer nudged her hand with his nose and she laughed, stroking the fur of his neck. And of course I'm glad to see Summer too. He seems to remember me. The wolves always remember their pack, Bran said, even when they've been gone for a long time. Arya smiled softly. Did you ever remember what happened that day, why you fell? Bran shook his head, looking out the window again. Sometimes I start to remember in my dreams, but then I forget by the time I wake up. I have so many dreams lately, it's hard to keep them all straight. One day you'll remember, Arya promised him. She glanced down at the book in his lap. What are you reading? An old book, Bran said, about the long night. He's been reading a lot of books from those times, Sansa said. Fortunately, all of the Meisters say that this winter will not be as long as originally thought. The worst of the winter is over. Spring will be here again within the year. There have been false springs before, Bran said. There's no guarantee of a new summer. Arya studied him. Her little brother seemed much grimmer than when she last seen him, and far older. His eyes had seen so much, and she imagined Rickon's death weighed heaviest on him. They were always so close. Summer whined and nudged Bran's hand with his nose. Bran shook his head once. Sorry, sometimes my mind gets lost in dark places, but you're home, there's no reason to be sad. There's plenty of reason, Arya murmured. Her returning home came at a great cost. Their brother had died. Her presence here could not replace him. The door to the hall opened again and Arya turned to see Talisa entering. She had 3 little ones with her. A boy trotting at her right, a little girl being guided along at her left, and a baby cradled in one arm. Lady Arya, I thought you might want to meet your nephews and your niece. Arya's eyes widened. My, what? Sansa smiled. These are Robb's children, Arya. The oldest boy is named Eddard for father, and the girl is named Lyanna for our aunt. The youngest is little Ben. For Uncle Benjen, Arya murmured. She was bewildered. Arya had not even known Robb had children. He had never sent word of them. She knew, of course, that he was married. Tywin had mentioned that more than once when she was his cupbearer, citing it as a grave mistake because he broke his vow to Walder Frey. But 3 children, an unexpected wave of joy washed over Arya. This is your Aunt Arya, Talisa told them. She's been away for a long while, but she's come back to visit. Arya knelt down to the children's eye level. The boy hid behind his mother's skirts while the girl was entirely unfazed. She reached out a tiny hand, and Arya held out her own, allowing her to grasp 2 of her fingers. Arya, Lyanna said, not quite old enough to manage the R sound. Something inside Arya melted. Yes, that's right, it's nice to meet you, Lyanna. She glanced at Ned, the boy with her father's name. He was peeking suspiciously out from behind his mother. Hello there, Ned. The boy ducked behind Talisa again. Come now, Ned, don't be shy. Say hello, Talisa urged. Once again he poked half of his face into view. One grey eye peeked out from beneath dark curls. It's all right, Arya said gently. There's no need to be afraid of me. I know I can be scary sometimes, but I would never be scary to you. Ned cautiously stepped out from behind Talisa. Then he gave Arya a little bow. Lady Arya. Arya laughed, so formal and serious already. He makes an effort to imitate his father, Talisa said. He's always following Robb about whenever he gets a chance. He looks like him, Arya said, stark grey eyes. The boys both have those eyes. I'm afraid only Lyanna took more after me, Talisa said. Lyanna grasped at Arya's hair, running her little fingers through it. Arya. Arya winced when the girl caught a tangle and carefully detached herself so she could stand. She found the baby watching her curiously when she did. Sure enough, he had the same grey eyes, though his skin was darker like his mother's. What beautiful children they were. Arya hoped they would grow up happy and free of any awful wars. None of them fell ill, she asked, with long summer's bane. No, thank the gods, Talisa said. They've all been very healthy. They were born in winter, Bran said, looking up from his book. They say winter children are always the strongest. If that's true, little Ben will be the strongest of them all, Sansa said. He was born in the midst of the worst blizzard I've ever seen. He'll grow up a White Northman indeed. They all will, I'm sure, Arya murmured. You've all done well here, I'm glad. There was a time when none of us were home. There have been a great many blessings, Talisa said, though also reasons to grieve. Arya's heart clenched as she remembered the reason she had returned, not just for reunions but for a goodbye. Yes, there are always reasons to grieve in this family. She looked at Sansa. I should visit the crypt. I can come with you if you'd like, Sansa said. No, Arya smiled sadly. I remember the way. The crypts used to scare most of the Stark children, but not Arya. The moment her older brother suggested she might be scared, she banished all fear from her heart and marched defiantly down into the depths to prove him wrong. There was no reason to fear the dead after all, and back then, all of the statues had belonged to people who had died before she was born. Now there were 2 new tombs, one for her father and one for Rickon. When she stepped into the crypt, something stirred in the shadows. A faint growl made Arya rest a hand on her sword, but then she recognized the eyes staring out at her. Shaggy dog, she slowly crouched down. It's good to see you again, boy. The great black direwolf watched her almost suspiciously. He had always been the wildest of the pack, never lacking for energy, just like Rickon. Thank you for watching over him for us, Arya said. I hope you still go out to hunt. Rickon would not want you to starve. She smiled sadly. Or should I bring you something to eat? Shaggy dog whined and approached her slowly. She reached out a hand and he nudged her palm with his nose, licking her skin once. That's it, good boy. Her heart shuddered and she struggled to hold back tears. I'm so sorry. Shaggy dog did not reply. He simply turned and trotted deeper into the crypt. Arya followed after him until she found herself in front of Rickon's resting place. There was no statue yet to mark his grave, though she was sure one would be made in time. Her throat closed up as she imagined his pale little body, lifeless and cold. No, he would be long rotted now. It had been a month since he died. She wasn't sure which was worse to imagine. I'm sorry, she murmured, that I didn't come home sooner. I promised we would see each other again and I couldn't keep that promise. She rubbed her fingers together. I'm not sure. If there is a life after this one, perhaps we will see each other again. I tend to doubt it. I don't believe much in afterlives or gods anymore, but if it meant being able to see you again, perhaps I would. Tears trailed down her face. I'm so sorry, Rickon. She lingered in front of his grave, saying a few prayers to gods she no longer believed in, for his sake. Then, when she had avoided it long enough, she turned toward the statue of her father. It didn't look like him. It was too cold and grim. She had known her father to laugh and smile often with her, and that was the face she liked to remember. But still she felt his spirit in this place, and it weighed heavily on her. Father, she murmured, I'm not sure this is the future you imagined for me, is it? You told me that one day I would marry a High Lord. Did you think it would be a Lannister? She shook her head. I haven't told the others yet. I'm not sure I can. They'll be horrified once I do. I'm sure you would have hated it as well. You'd hate me being Tywin Lannister's ward too. a hostage in a game of war, but there's peace at least. Most of us are still alive. Is that enough? The stone did not reply, but still Arya kept talking. Being back home had brought so many long-buried emotions to the surface. I have part of your sword. Arya drew it from her sheath and presented it to him. Lord Tywin gave it to me. It's a bit of a long story, but at least one of your children has a piece of ice. She turned the blade twice in her hand. I know you didn't expect it to be me, a daughter. You always hoped I would grow up to be a graceful lady. You gave me a teacher, but part of you hoped I would drop the sword one day, didn't you? You never wanted me to see a real battle. Well, at any rate I haven't seen a battle, but I have killed people, 5 with my own hand, 1 with someone else's. What's that you always said? The man who passes the sentence must swing the sword. I didn't do that with Joffrey. Arya swallowed hard. Would you have disapproved of that? Killing a king is a great crime after all. Would you have been disappointed in me for what I did? I know you hated Jaime Lannister for killing an awful king once. But maybe I'm absolved because I'm not Kingsguard. She gave a mirthless laugh. He has the other half of your sword, you know. You must hate that. I don't like it either. Even if he's not as awful as you always said, not nearly. For a moment she lapsed into silence. She imagined her father was standing beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. What would his expression be if he were there? Angry, proud, disappointed. You always believed so much in honour, she murmured, that it was the thing that held the world together. Lord Tywin says that the honour you preached was just an illusion, that no one is fully honourable. Her jaw clenched. I think you're both wrong, to a point. The world isn't held together by honour. There's not enough of it to go around. It's held together by family, by people who would kill for each other. But I do still believe there are good people, honourable people, not many maybe. But more than Lord Tywin believes. Arya looked up at his statue again. You were good, truly you were so good. A wave of sadness welled up inside of her. I don't think I am. I don't think there's a limit to what awful things I would do to protect our family. I would lie, I would kill, I would violate every law in this world. The gods could not stop me. Tears fell fresh now. Bitter, awful tears, and I'm sorry you have to see it. Her father did not reply. Of course he didn't. He was dead and gone and he could not see. But if by chance he could, if by chance his spirit lingered in this place, or looked down on her from above, she was sorry for all that he would witness. Chapter 32, Different. Arya's arrival had brought mixed feelings to Winterfell. Of course, Robb was happy to see her, and less than happy to play host to the Lannisters, but more troubling than the Lannisters was the letter Arya carried. Robb was worried to begin with when Arya gave him the letter one Tywin Lannister had charged her to deliver to him directly. It meant he did not trust a raven to carry the words. Reading the letter, Robb saw why. Broken vows often have a way of collecting their debts. Some families may be plotting to collect theirs. Beware the Freys, and more than that, beware the Boltons and all those aligned with them. They are not your allies, Lord Stark. Robb had known to be wary of the Freys ever since he took Talisa to wife, but beware the Boltons. That was a new warning to Robb. More importantly, how did Tywin know that he should beware the Boltons? Had they tried to make some deal in the past when Robb was still in rebellion? There were no specifics in the letter, perhaps because specifics would reveal Tywin's past plans, which Robb suspected were less than honourable. Now that the Lion was determined to keep peace with their family, could his warnings be trusted? His mother seemed equally worried by the note. If Roose Bolton and Walder Frey are our enemies, we do have reason to fear, she said. I've learned to fear words not delivered by Raven. And what can I do? Robb asked. If I accuse Roose Bolton of treachery without proof or cause, then that could throw the North into a civil war. We don't need to accuse him. We only need to watch him, Catelyn said. All of the Northern Lords will be coming to court in a few days' time. This is an opportunity to observe Bolton and to see who is aligned with him. She paused for a moment, thinking, I suggest you ask your sister what she thinks of all this. Arya, Robb asked, what would she know about it? She has been in King's Landing for the past few years, near to Tywin, she reminded him. He may have said something more to her. Tywin would not share this kind of information with a ward, Robb said. Perhaps not, but you know Arya. She absorbs everything like a sponge, Catelyn said. That was true enough, and it struck Robb as odd that Tywin would trust Arya to carry the letter instead of one of his guards, not to mention the sword at her hip. That was a very fine blade that he allowed her to carry. He could not help but wonder if Arya had found favour with her captor. Robb could not fathom how anyone could find favour with that man. He was inscrutable and unmovable, Even so, it did not hurt to ask. Since returning home, Arya spent a fair amount of time wandering the grounds, especially on days with a clear sky. So Robb also had to wander in order to find her. Eventually he tracked her to the courtyard where she was standing opposite Brienne, turning a sparring sword in her hand. Jaime Lannister was sitting off to the side watching them, wrapping the stump of his wrist with another layer of fabric to protect from the cold. "I'm not quite sure of this, Lady Arya," Brienne said. "I can't cut you with a sparring sword," Arya pointed out. "That's not what I mean," Brienne said. "Don't underestimate her, my lady," Jaime called out. "That's her greatest advantage in the field." "Then perhaps you shouldn't have given it away," Arya cast him a glare. Jaime smirked and shrugged. Robb looked on, fascinated. There was a strange familiarity between them. At the very least, Arya did not speak to him as if he was her captor. She did not seem wary of him at all. "Ignore him," Arya told Brienne. "Just come at me with your best. I did not get near as much practice as I wanted while on the road." Brienne sighed at last and nodded. "Very well." She adjusted her grip on her sparring sword, then swung at Arya. Arya took a step back, just far enough to avoid the tip of the blade. Brienne struck again, and she dodged again, sidestepping and nudging the blade with her sparring sword to redirect it. Brienne seemed to be testing her to make sure that she could indeed carry herself in a fight. To Robb's surprise, she could. Her footwork was rather effortless as she dodged and redirected Brienne's blows. Her expression did not even shift. She was completely calm and unreadable. "Dodging is her specialty," Jaime said. "You'll never hit her like that." Arya cast him a glare. "Why are you helping her? Shouldn't you be on my side?" "I want to see you both fight at your best. What's wrong with that?" Jaime waved his stump of a hand. "I can't fight at my best anymore. You watch out." Arya spun to the side to avoid another attack from Brienne. The taller woman kept a straight face, but Robb could see the amusement in her eyes. "You shouldn't let him distract you," Brienne said. "That will lose you this fight quickly." Arya grinned. "Okay then, I won't." The two women began to fight in earnest then. Robb could not help but watch. Brienne was a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield, partly owing to her outstanding strength and speed. She was a woman, but she was larger than many of his men. She had been a great help to them in quelling the Greyjoy rebellion. But Arya was keeping pace with her. She did not have Brienne's strength, but she matched her in speed. She fought with one hand and relied mostly on intricate footwork to keep one step ahead of her opponent. She never blocked the full force of Brienne's blows. Brienne would knock her down if she tried. She was just redirecting the momentum. They circled around each other over and over again in the courtyard, Arya dodging and attacking fluidly like water, while Brienne bore down on her with the brute force of a knight. Then Arya's left foot slipped on a patch of snow, and Brienne knocked her back with the butt of her sword. Arya fell flat on her back with a gasp, and Brienne moved forward, prepared to bring her sword down. Her next blow knocked Arya's sword from her hand, but his sister was not deterred. She rolled between Brienne's legs and stood to her feet again, just as Brienne brought her sword back and levelled it with her neck. "That's you dead," Brienne said. Arya smirked. "And you." Only now did Robb notice she had pulled a knife and slipped it through the gap in the armour at Brienne's armpit. "Well played," Brienne said, "but I still would have taken off half your head. And I would have punctured your lung. Better to die taking your enemy with you than not at all," Arya straightened. "You're good, better than good. I suspect you were still taking it easy on me." "I was wary of using my full strength, yes," Brienne said. "Though even if I did, you were doing a sound job at dodging. I'm not used to fighting such a small opponent." Arya smiled. "We will have to spar again then." "Told you that you'd enjoy it," Jaime said. Arya made a face at him. Brienne placed the sparring sword on the table, then turned to notice Robb. "Lord Stark." Immediately Arya tensed and looked to Robb as if wondering how long he had been watching. "Robb, how are you this morning?" "Well enough," Robb smiled. "Can I speak with you for a moment? It's about that letter you brought me." "Right." Arya crossed to retrieve her two real swords, the needle-like blade from Jon and the other one. Where had she gotten that from, he wondered. "Lead the way." Once Arya had strapped her blades to her belt, they crossed up onto the battlements of Winterfell, away from any prying ears. In the distance, Robb thought he saw Greywind and Summer passing through the trees. They often stayed outside the castle walls where they could run free. Direwolves didn't like to be caged after all. Did you read the letter that Lord Tywin asked you to deliver? Robb asked when he was sure they were alone. No, Arya said. He said it was for your eyes only. Robb's mouth twitched. His sister had retained some honesty even after all of her time in King's Landing. I hoped he might have mentioned something about it to you. He handed the letter to her. Here. Arya read over the letter quickly, her brow furrowed. Then she gave it back to him. No, I don't know anything about this. But then again, I have not spoken with Lord Tywin in nearly a year. Robb tilted his head to the side. Did you speak with him often before that? Arya picked at the finger of her gloves. I wouldn't say often. More often than most wards talk to their captors, Robb asked. Arya exhaled. Yes, that's likely. A particularly icy gust of wind swept over them and they both shivered. Robb glanced down at her second sword again. That's a fine new blade you're carrying. Did you name it? Arya smiled a bit. Winter's Fury. That's a strong name, Robb said. Where did you get it? She ducked her head slightly. Arya was not one to make herself smaller, but in that moment she looked as if she wanted to vanish. It was a gift, well, not really a gift, more like a debt paid. A debt paid by Tywin Lannister? Robb asked. When she did not respond, he knew he was right. What debt did he owe you? I suppose he wouldn't have told you, Arya said. He kept the details of his almost assassination rather quiet. He does hate showing weakness. What are you talking about? Robb asked. Arya looked up at him. I saved his life. I was with him when the assassins came. I killed them and got him to the Maester before the poison could take him. Robb blinked, unsure for a long moment what to say. It was for you, she continued on. I knew that if Lord Tywin died, you would never leave the city alive, but even though I didn't do it for him, he still paid the debt. I see, Robb said at last. Arya's mouth twitched. You find it hard to believe, don't you, that I've actually killed someone? You always thought I was playing a game when I tried to spar, but I know how to use a sword and I know how to use a knife. I don't play with either. Robb exhaled. It's not that, Arya. I've always known you were fierce and brave enough for 10 men, and moments ago I saw your skill with a blade. I just wish you didn't have to kill or fight. Arya rested a hand on the hilt of her sword, running her fingers along the pommel. I do like fighting, Robb. It's not just a necessary evil for me, I enjoy it. And killing, Robb asked. Do you enjoy killing too? Arya stared out at the icy landscape. Her throat bobbed up and down as she swallowed a bit too hard. In the silence, Robb knew the answer before she spoke. Sometimes, yes. Robb's heart clenched. How much Arya had grown up since they handed her over to Tywin Lannister. At first glance, she was still his little sister, but the longer he looked, the more he saw the little changes. In the way she held her shoulders, in her measured tone when she spoke, in the hard glint in her silver eyes. His sister absorbed everything like a sponge, and that included bits and pieces of Tywin Lannister. Robb looked down at the letter in his hand again, very much wanting to change the subject. In a few days, the Northern Lords will be coming to court. If Roose Bolton is a traitor like Lord Tywin suggests, we might find proof of it there. Would you like me to watch him? Arya asked. Carefully, Robb said. If you notice him talking to particular lords, let me know. Sitting up at the table, listening to everyone, I don't have an opportunity to watch. You can leave it to me, Arya murmured. I'll let you know if I see anything suspicious. I'm rather good at watching people. Good, Robb said. Also, tell Jaime Lannister to make himself very scarce. I'd prefer it if he locked himself in his room. The Karstarks will be coming. He killed some of their own in the war. I don't want to deal with the fallout of that. You could tell him that, couldn't you? Arya asked. He seems more likely to listen to you, Robb said. Arya fell silent, looking oddly nervous again, but Robb did not have time to push her for any more secrets. He wasn't sure he'd like the answers. He couldn't expect Arya to be unchanged. She was a hostage, a prisoner of war to perhaps the most dangerous man in the 7 kingdoms. The fact that she was alive and strong was blessing enough. Even in Winterfell, Jaime tried to keep up his practice. It was important to drill relentlessly with his left hand until it became second nature to him. It would never be as effortless as with his right hand, but he could still be better than most men if he just worked harder at it. The Northmen gave him distrustful looks when they saw him practicing. He wondered if they were looking at his sword. Could they sense the metal of their old lord's sword in his blade? Unlikely, but still he was aware of it. Perhaps I'm angering Ned Stark's ghost, Jaime thought. Lord Stark would be awfully furious to see him with even a small piece of his sword after all. Brienne of Tarth distrusted him like anyone else, but she wasn't particularly afraid to speak with him. In fact, she was far more direct than most people, which Jaime found refreshing. "Why did you come north with Lady Stark?" she asked. "My father asked me to," Jaime said simply, turning his blade a few times in his hand. "And why did he ask you?" "My lady, I do not have access to my father's mind." "No one does," Jaime said. "I suspect he wanted someone trustworthy watching his ward on her visit home." "So you are not here with any darker intentions?" Brienne asked. Jaime raised an eyebrow. "If I was, do you think I would confess them here?" Brienne's eyes narrowed. "Truce," Jaime sighed. "I don't want to fight. Despite what you think of me, I didn't come here to start trouble." Brienne was quiet for a moment. "Strangely enough, you seem to be telling the truth." "Yes, strange, isn't it?" Jaime turned away from her, swiping twice in quick succession with his sword. "A Lannister telling the truth, it's quite a novelty." She did not rise to the bait of his sarcasm. "You are much changed since our last meeting." "I think it's the missing hand." "No," Brienne said seriously, "not just the missing hand." Jaime turned to face her. "Enlighten me then, my lady." "For one thing, you've barely insulted me at all." "That's different," Brienne said. Jaime smirked. "Did you miss my insults, wench?" "Not remotely, Kingslayer," Brienne replied without missing a beat. Jaime sheathed his sword. "Ah, that old nickname. I expect I'll be hearing it quite often here." "It's true, is it not?" Yes, it's true," Jaime said tiredly. Behind him the gates opened. A lone rider cantered inside, dressed in all in black. It took Jaime a moment to recognize the newcomer. The winter had aged him, but it was still very clearly Ned Stark's bastard son, Jon Snow. The bastard of Winterfell noticed Jaime almost immediately. A mix of anger and confusion crossed his face. "Lannister, what are you doing here?" "I could ask the same of you," Jaime asked. "Not deserting the Night's Watch, are you?" "No," Jon swung off his horse. "I'm here on behalf of the Lord Commander." "You moved quickly up the ranks to be acting on the Lord Commander's behalf," Jaime said. "Did you kill anyone for it?" Jon glared at him. He had his hand rested on the hilt of his sword. "A few, yes, you didn't answer my question." "Relax, Snow, I'm just an escort." "An escort for whom?" Jon asked. "Jon," a voice called from behind them. Jon's hand slipped off of his sword in an instant. Jaime barely turned before Arya rushed past him and launched herself into Jon Snow's arms. He caught her up in a tight hug. Jaime had not seen her embrace any of her other family with quite so much abandon. This was her favourite sibling, to be sure. "Gods, Arya, I had no idea you were coming," Jon murmured when he set her down. "I came when I heard Rickon had passed," Arya said. "And you?" "Yes, the same reason," Jon said. "And to find recruits for the watch." He mussed her hair a bit. "It's so good to see you. I wouldn't think the Lannisters would allow you to come home." "Hence the escort," Jaime said. "Not that she needs protecting." Jon looked his sister up and down, as if checking her for any injuries the Lannister might have wrought. He noticed the smaller of her swords and smiled. "You kept it close." "Always," Arya said. "It's the only thing I had of home." "You found a proper sword as well, I see," Jon said, nodding to the second blade on her hip. "Needle is a proper sword as well," Arya protested. "Just smaller." "I'm not jealous, Arya. I'm glad you're allowed to carry it." He glanced at Jaime. "Why is she allowed to carry it?" Jaime shrugged. "Good behaviour." "Yes, we'll leave it at that." Arya smiled up at Jon. Jaime had never seen her so unapologetically happy. "Does Robb know you're coming? I can take you to him." "In a moment," Jon said. "I'd like to visit Rickon first." "Do you want company?" "Yes, I think I do." Jon Snow gave Jaime one last suspicious look before he followed his sister across the courtyard. Jaime gave him a little wave. It was curious seeing Arya Stark with her family. She had said once that they didn't have much tension between them, that they all got along well enough. Jaime didn't believe it until he saw it, but she wasn't lying. Her brothers adored her. She and her sister seemed closer than ever. Of course, Arya was keeping secrets, but that seemed a normal thing. On the whole, the years of tragedy had only knit the Starks tighter together. So this is what a normally functioning family is like, Jaime thought, raising his sword again to continue practicing. Father should take notes. The dark of the crypt seemed less oppressive with Jon for company. Arya had not even thought to see him on this trip. He was a man of the Night's Watch after all. This was an unexpected joy. She only wished that Rickon had not died to make it happen. Jon absently stroked Shaggy Dog's fur as he stood in front of Rickon's grave. He was changed, just like her, from his time away from home. His eyes had seen terrible things. His blade had killed many people. But she did not want to ask about any of that. If she did, then he might ask her questions, and she didn't want to lie to Jon. "How is Ghost?" Arya asked at last. "Well," Jon said. "He came with me and found Greywind and Summer in the trees. He remembers his siblings even after all this time." Arya smiled softly. "They remember me too. When I came back, I worried they might not." Jon sighed and mussed her hair. "Why not? You're still the same girl who left, just a bit taller." Arya smirked. "You're the same too, and not taller." They laughed at that, even though it wasn't true. They were different. They were all different. It was stupid to pretend otherwise, but Arya couldn't help it. Jon was always the one who understood her and let her play the night without any judgment. He gave her Needle, and with Needle she had killed her first enemy. She wondered if he knew, if he had guessed, that she was a killer. "Arya, are you all right, truly?" Jon asked. Arya shrugged. "Why wouldn't I be?" "A million possible reasons," Jon said. "You've been a hostage away from home for years, a hostage to the Lannisters no less. When Sansa returned home she was, well, I heard she had plenty of nightmares. You've been down south longer than her." Arya shook her head. "I imagine Sansa had worse experiences in the south than me. She was betrothed to that monster after all. Joffrey came after me a few times, but, well, he's dead now." "I heard," Jon said, "and you don't have any other tormentors." "If I did, would you fight them?" Arya raised an eyebrow. "I can fight for myself, I promise." "I know, but can you blame me for wondering?" Jon asked. "Whether you can fight doesn't matter. Sometimes people back you into a corner where you can't fight." "It's not a problem if I avoid corners," Arya said. Jon gave her a look and she smiled softly. "It's all right, I do understand what you mean, and I won't pretend that there haven't been hard moments. I just don't mind them. If our family and the Lannisters stay at peace, I can handle it." "That's not your job, you know," Jon murmured, "to keep the peace." Arya looked away. Out of the corner of her eye she was aware of her father's statue flickering in the lantern light. Someone has to. Jon settled a hand on her shoulder, squeezing lightly. "We don't have to speak of the past if you don't want. If you say you're all right, then I trust you. I'll leave it at that." Arya nodded once. For a moment so many stories came to her mind. Her fight with the assassins, the pain of being beaten at Joffrey's orders, killing Joffrey, but she couldn't tell him any of it, of all of her family. She wished that Jon would see her as the same, as his little sister. It was stupid, but sometimes she liked to pretend nothing had changed. It was an unexpected joy for Jon to see his little sister again. When he went to the Wall, he knew he wouldn't see her often. When he heard she was taken captive by Tywin Lannister, he thought he might never see her again. To see her after all of these years, still smiling with Needle at her hip, well, it was a rare bright spot. Most of Jon's life was not particularly bright. With Mance Rayder marching closer and closer to the Wall and continued sightings of the others, the Night's Watch was dreadfully under-equipped. He needed men. He needed a lot of men, more than could be provided by scouring dungeons. That was why he had come to Robb for help. His brother had a great many cares as Lord of Winterfell. They had aged him, and yet the position suited him. He looked more like their father than ever, and he carried himself proudly. Jon had always envied Robb for how much better he was than him at everything. People, politics, fighting, girls, but he had never hated him for any of it. Robb was very hard to hate. "The cold seems to have made you grimmer than ever," Robb said when Jon entered the great hall. "Aye, it's much colder at the Wall than here. This feels almost like spring," Jon said with a smile. Robb smiled in return, embracing him warmly. "I'm glad you could come." "I'm sorry I did not come sooner. I wish I could have seen Rickon before." Robb squeezed his shoulder. "You're a man of the Night's Watch. Your life isn't your own. Rickon would understand." Jon nodded once. "I wish that I came only to grieve, but it's the Night's Watch that sends me here as well. Mance Rayder is close with 100,000 men, and we do not have the forces to repel him for long." "You have a rather high wall," Robb reminded him. "It's not enough. He has giants," Jon said. "Giants." I've seen them with my own eyes, and I swear I am not mad, Jon said. We need more men. You can have your pick of the dungeons, Robb said, as always. I could drain every dungeon in the north and not have enough, Jon said. There are only a few hundred of us at Castle Black, a few hundred against tens of thousands. We can hold it for a time, but not for long. What do you suggest then? Robb asked. I cannot ask decent, law-abiding men to take the Black against their will. I don't need them to take the Black, Jon said. Men can ride north to fight of their own free will without saying any vows. In times like these, the Lord Commander would not deny them. Robb ran a hand over his face. That may entice more men. They are tired from war, but no one wants wildlings running across our lands unchecked. He looked up at Jon. You came at a good time. A few days from now, the Northern Lords arrive for court. I will let you speak to them then. Jon let out a breath. Thank you, truly. Think nothing of it. Starks have guarded the wall for thousands of years, Robb said. It is our duty. Jon raised an eyebrow. I'm not a Stark. You are, Robb said. If you weren't part of the Night's Watch, well, I would have given you the name Stark by now, legitimized you. You've more than earned it. But the Stark name will do you little good at the wall. Jon felt a well of emotion rising up inside of him. How long he had wanted the name Stark. He hated the name Snow for the longest time, but Robb was right. The name didn't matter now. Jon's life was not his own. Snow was as good a name as any. Have you seen Arya yet? Robb continued. I know she would be happy to see you. She found me as soon as I arrived, Jon said. Strange that Jaime Lannister is here with her. Keeping an eye on us, I expect, Robb said. His father will want a full report on the loyalty of the North. I suppose, Jon said. Does Arya seem well to you? Robb hesitated. Well, yes, but different. We can't blame her for that. She's had to survive down south. He paced to the window. I wish I could have saved her, Jon. When Tywin Lannister forced us to make peace, when he dangled her in front of me, I wished I could have killed him then and taken her back home with us. It would have meant more war, Jon said, and more Stark deaths. Father would have hated it, me sacrificing her for peace. He always loved Arya so much. Robb shook his head. Anything that happens to her now, however she has changed, that is on my shoulders. Arya would be angry at you for saying it, Jon said. You have the North on your shoulders already, and what's done is done. You can't change the past. If Arya has changed, well, she was never going to stay our little sister forever. No, Robb murmured. I wish she could have. I wish we all could have stayed as we were 4 years ago. It was so much better then. It was better, even though Jon had been a bastard and Catelyn Stark had hated him. It was all so much better when their father was alive, when Rickon was alive, when Sansa and Arya were home and safe, when Bran still had his legs. But the past was gone, and none of them had gone unchanged by the war, and Jon had a feeling there was still much more to come.